The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky has gotten a lot of reputation, especially from the handheld community. Kotaku even went on a limb and posted an article recently stating that Trails in the Sky was the greatest JRPG of the decade. I reviewed the game last month and gave it a stellar 9 out of 10, which is something I don't give very many PSP games. So here I am in December, kicking the month off with another Legend of Heroes review. Here is my retro review of The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, 2nd Chapter. The first question you're going to ask is the question that every Vita owner asks whenever a sequel gets released for a series. Can I play Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, 2nd Chapter without playing the first? The answer is no. Trails in the Sky is a 3-game story that's all together. 2nd Chapter picks up the moment 1st Chapter leaves off and cannot be played on its own. You can't because 1, you're not going to understand the story, and 2, the game is going to direct you to a lot of places from the first game and it's not going to tell you where they are. It's going to assume you've played the first game and you already know where they are. Picking up right where the first game left off, Joshua has disappeared, leaving Estelle Bright, our heroine, in a panic. Dead set on pursuing and recovering her dear friend, she goes on a journey to get special training and to find him. Along the way, just like in the first game, she uncovers a sinister plot, though this time around, it is a much bigger scale. The plot she uncovers is done by a group that had a very large hand in the events of the first game, even though we didn't know it at the time. One last thing I'll say about the story is that this does not end on a huge cliffhanger like the first Trails in the Sky does. Trails in the Sky SC, or 2nd Chapter, is almost exactly like 1st Chapter. As far as genre is concerned, it is a turn-based RPG with strategy RPG elements thrown into the mix. The main additions made in this game are mostly in the form of combat elements. In addition to all of the different attacks and skills you could use in the first game, you have a new type of attack called Chain Attack. These are powerful attacks that let multiple party members team up and attack the enemy together. Progressing through the game is pretty much the same as it was before. You're going around a world map, going from town to town to town to town. You stop at the guild, help out with the guild, advance the story, and there are also a lot of different side missions you can do with the guild and with various boss monsters that are littered around the map. As far as areas are concerned, there are a lot of familiar areas that you'll be revisiting in Trails in the Sky 2nd Chapter. A lot of the dungeons are different than they were, like new paths, repaired buildings, etc, etc, and there are a lot of new areas that you go through as well. What areas are tied to is something that I think I should talk to you about because I found it very interesting, being a tech person as I am. Trails in the Sky 2nd Chapter has 2 discs, each as their own download. If you recall, the first Trails in the Sky was a 1.3 gigabyte file. Trails in the Sky 2 is divided into 2 separate downloads. One is 1.1 gigabyte and the other is 1.4 gigabytes. The more interesting part about this is that locations are allocated to various discs. The city of Grancel is on disc 1, but all events in Grancel are on disc 1. So you can go through up to chapter 4, go on to disc 2, and then when you get to chapter 8, you're going to have to go back to disc 1 because you're revisiting Grancel. Even though you've already cleared the story early on, the disc 2 events for Grancel are stored on disc 1. This is a little odd, but also very interesting. You can expect about the same amount of difficulty that the first game gave you. Even if you play on the easy difficulty, you are not going to have a breeze through this game. Some bosses aren't too bad, but there are a lot of bosses that are extremely difficult and require a lot of strategy to be able to fight. Especially in the final dungeon, you will find situations where after every major boss fight, you're going to have to completely redo all of your equipment setups to prepare for the next one. Now with length, Xseed Games boasted that this game was going to be even longer than the first Trails in the Sky, and it is. When I reached the final boss, I had logged more than 60 hours in the game, and that's without doing many side missions. I reached the final boss of Trails in the Sky 1 in about 40 hours, so we're talking about a 20-hour difference in gameplay depth and length. As far as the presentation is concerned, I only have one criticism. Just like in the first game, Trails in the Sky SC does look a little blurred when stretched out on the PlayStation TV or PS Vita. Performance is very good, though I have had a few people comment to me about the load times. Let me explain the difference in load times. The load times are slightly longer in Trails in the Sky second chapter. By longer, I mean the 3-second battle load times from the first game are now 4-second load times. The only reason I'm even mentioning it is because I've had several people talk about it as I've been playing the game. The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky SC, aka Trails in the Sky second chapter, is something that many people have wanted in the West for a very long time. On the downside, it still does have some blurring in its presentation, just like the first game. Outside of that is an RPG just as grand and deep as its predecessor, and in some ways, it's even deeper than the first game. If you're a fan of Trails in the Sky or The Legend of Heroes, this will not disappoint you. Reviews to Go rates The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky second chapter a 9 out of 10. If you'd like to comment on this further, feel free to below or head to my site at reviewstogo.com.